Welcome back to the brush review series in which I test out size 10 round brushes. In this episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Vinci Casaneo or Casaneo. I'm sure somebody can correct me on my spelling and tell me which is the right pronunciation in the comments. This is the round, and I know it looks like a mop, but it's not a mop. It's the round series, which is the series 5598. And it is made with synthetic squirrel, so it's synthetic and vegan friendly. It is made in Germany, and this series, the Casaneo, is also available in travel brush series. So if you like this brush but want to take it out on a plein air or on your travels, then you can also get that as well. This brush comes in 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 16, 20, 24. So 24 is pretty big, but compared to other brands, it doesn't go up to like size 40. I would love to one day buy a size 40 brush and just see how ridiculously big it is. And this is a brush for watercolor, and the overall brush length is 23.8 centimeters, which is pretty average. Bristle length is 2.8 centimeters here, and then the diameter of the bristle is 6.3 millimeters. It has a very fluffy, moppy, bushy bristle. And let's give you a snap test. It's very fluffy. It's a soft snap. It is priced at £14.50 at Jackson's, which is $19.68 US. And then it's also available in Blick at $22.10. In terms of water capacity, as you can see, it holds a lot of water, and I didn't once run out of water in this chart. I felt like it was getting there with starting to run out of color, or not run out, but start getting the white coming through just as I was doing the last few. So it will probably go down to about here in terms of solid lines, and it will carry on going even further with like the dry brushing texture. In terms of up and down, it has a really good even release of water. You don't get too much difference. You don't get dark patches that are like so much darker than the rest. This one was pretty even. There's a little bit here, but I would say that in terms of offloading the water, it's one of the best that I've tested so far. The issue I did feel with the up and down action though, it goes down nicely together. The hairs stay together, but when you come back up, the bristles don't clump together nicely or as quickly as other brands. So you can see that there's some unevenness coming up here. And that's something that you might just want to keep an eye out on if you want to use a lot of up and down actions in your painting. It has a huge max width. I nearly ran out of space. Let's see how wide that is. It is 2.7 centimeters wide. So that is a full centimeter wider than the Da Vinci Cosmos Spin, which I will link up here, that we saw in the last episode. So it's much wider in the max width. And with the belly drag, I found that the tip didn't touch the paper. It was just all here. Some brushes, it feels like this whole length is attached to the paper and you get good contact, whereas with this brush the tip didn't go anywhere near the paper, and the belly was so swollen with water that you just got the belly drag. But as you can see, it holds a lot of water and it's very even in how it releases that water. One thing that really surprised me with this brush was the tip of this brush. It looks like a moppy brush, but it has very fine tip, and I will show you what it looks like when the tip is wet. This is the brush wet, and as you can see, it has very fine point. Thin point. That is super thin. And this is just with the rubbing the brush on the edge of the jar to get rid of some water. You can see how full and swollen that brush belly is. And that holds a lot of water, but also when you are dragging it across, you can see how the tip would stay up rather than and not touch the paper. This is this brush again, but with the water squeezed out with a tissue, and you can see how thin that tip is. It'll be interesting to see how well it keeps that tip. But it's so fine. It almost has like just a few hairs at the tip, so you can actually get really thin lines. I recommend that to get the thinnest of lines, to keep the line short. As you can see here, these lines are much thinner than the longer lines, but you can get really thin lines, which is amazing because it also can do this wide a max width. In terms of leaf, you can see that the water release is pretty even. It's not perfect, but it is really good. And then you can get really nice thin tip because of that fine tip you get on the tip of the brush, but you get some unevenness coming through when you lift that brush. In terms of snake, it's a lovely soft brush, so there's no kinks in it whatsoever. Not surprisingly, for a brush that holds so much water, I could do this flat wash in one go. And because it felt like there was so much more water left, I actually did a test to see how much paint it actually holds. And this is the result, which is, this is just one load of wash, and it holds a huge amount, considering some brushes require several loads just to fill that bit. And this is at least double. I would say it's about 2.5 times the flat wash area on this test sheet. So that is a huge amount of water. But also you get good control with the tip. Even when you got a lot of water in there, it's a really even release. It's great. In terms of gradation, I would say it's average. It's a very soft brush, so you can't wring out the water quite so well. Because it's such an absorbent brush and it holds so much water, it doesn't like releasing the water as much. So if you just run your brush on the edge of a jar, then it's still going to have too much water. So if you are going to do gradation, I highly recommend dabbing it on some tissue paper or kitchen roll or towel before you go in. It felt, when I was doing the gradation, that the brush just almost sucked onto the paper. There was a feeling of a suction on the paper, which is really nice to have. In terms of lifting up the paint, because it's a soft brush, you're not going to get a really good lift, but for a soft brush, I think this is pretty good. In terms of dashes, yes, it's uneven because you only have very few hairs right at the tip that is thin, and it's very easy to get to thicker lines without intending to do so. So you don't have that much control, or it's very hard to control how fine a line you're going to get. You can see that here that it's mixed, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if you do things like fur. And if you do fur, but in very consistent, perfectly equal thinness, it doesn't look quite so natural. Or it might not be fur, but like grass and things, if you do it perfectly the same way as all of them, it doesn't look natural and it doesn't have depths and dimensions. So it's not a bad thing that it's hard to control, because it means if you want that variety, it's very easy for you to get that without you putting any particular effort to do so. What do I think of this brush? I think this is another wonderful brush. It holds a huge amount of water, and yet it can do thin lines, and the water release is very even. The only downside to this is that the edges can be uneven, especially when you're coming up, but also just around the snakes and stuff. So if you want crisp lines, maybe avoid this. But if you like that look, I think this is a good all-rounder soaking wet brush. I always find that it's really good to have a really almost a dry brush, like the Proline Pro Art Plus for some things, and then to have a more wet brush for other textures and techniques and looks that you want to have. So I would recommend this as a good wet brush. That's it for this episode. In the next episode, we're going to be taking a look at the Jackson Torre, and I really recommend you check that out because I had a terrible time painting with it. It's definitely going to be an interesting one. If you'd like to purchase this brush, because it's a really good brush, I leave links down below to Jackson's and Blick and Amazon so that you can buy this, and using that link really helps me because it doesn't cost you any extra, but the sellers will provide me with a small fee that goes towards supporting this channel. So it's a great free way to financially support any channel that you like on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching this video. Do let me know in the comments down below what you think of this brush, and I will speak to you in the next episode. Bye!